I used to work as a night security guard at a shopping mall just outside the city. Most people think a job like that would be boring. And honestly, most nights it was. My shift started at 11 p.m., right after the mall closed, and ended around 6 in the morning. My job was simple. Walk through the building every hour, make sure every store was locked, and watch the CCTV cameras in the security office. The mall itself was pretty big. 3 floors, long hallways, escalators in the middle, and a food court on the top level. During the day it was loud and crowded, but at night, it was completely different. When the last customers left and the lights dimmed, the place felt almost like a different building. The echoes were louder. Every sound carried farther. And the silence sometimes felt heavy. Still, even after a few weeks working there, I got used to it. Most nights followed the same routine. At 11 p.m., the cleaning crew would come in and work for about an hour. By midnight, they would leave, and after that, it was usually just me in the entire building. Just me and the cameras. Or at least, that's what I thought. One night, about 8 months into the job, something happened that made me realize I was probably never as alone in that mall as I believed. It was a Thursday night. Pretty normal day. The mall closed around 10:30 p.m., and by 11 most of the stores had shut their gates. I remember finishing my first patrol around 11:40 p.m. Everything was locked. The food court chairs were stacked on tables. Escalators had been turned off. Nothing unusual at all. And so I went back to the security office on the first floor and sat down in front of the monitors. There were about 20 different camera feeds covering the whole building. Entrances, hallways, escalators, parking garage, storage corridors. I usually kept half my attention on the screens and the other half on my phone just to pass the time. Around 12:15 a.m., something on one of the screens caught my eye. At first, I thought it was just a reflection. The camera was pointed at the second floor hallway, near a clothing store that had closed earlier that night. But on the monitor, I could see someone walking, a person, just moving slowly down the hallway. I sat up immediately. That didn't make sense. Everyone should have left hours ago. I leaned closer to the monitor. The figure looked like a man, tall, wearing dark clothes, walking slowly past the closed stores. At first, I assumed it was one of the cleaners who had forgotten something and came back. But then I checked the main entrance camera. No one had come in. Then I checked the employee exit camera near the back of the building. Still nothing. No doors had opened in the last 30 minutes. Which meant one thing. Whoever that person was, they were already inside the mall, and they hadn't left. I grabbed the radio and called the cleaning crew supervisor just in case someone had stayed behind.
I know you're here.
No answer. So I checked the hallway camera again. But now, the hallway was empty. The man was gone. No movement. No one there. I switched between cameras trying to figure out where he went. Then I saw him again. Another camera picked him up near the escalators. Same tall figure. He's still walking slowly. But this time, something about him made me feel uneasy. He wasn't looking around like someone lost. He wasn't using his phone. He wasn't checking store windows. He was just walking straight down the hallway, almost like he knew exactly where he was going. And then suddenly, he stopped, right in the middle of the hallway, and slowly turned his head toward the security camera, even though he was on the second floor, and the camera was mounted high on the ceiling. It somehow looked like he was staring directly into it, directly at me. And that's when the camera feed suddenly cut to static for a second. When the picture came back, the hallway was empty again. No man, no movement, nothing. For a few seconds, I just stared at the screen, trying to convince myself I imagined it. But then something happened that made my stomach drop. Because one of the other monitors suddenly changed. This time it was the camera inside the food court on the third floor. And standing in the middle of the empty tables was the same man, completely still, facing the camera. Like he had somehow moved 2 floors in less than 10 seconds, without using the escalator, without appearing on any other cameras. And that's when I realized something that made the entire situation worse. Because according to the building schedule, every escalator and elevator in the mall had already been shut down for the night. which meant there was no way for anyone to get to the third floor, unless they were already there, or unless they knew the building better than I did. For a few seconds, I just sat there staring at the monitor. The man was still standing in the food court, completely motionless. The camera showed rows of empty tables, chairs stacked on top of them, and the dim overhead lights that stayed on overnight. And right in the middle of that space was the figure. Tall, wearing what looked like a dark hoodie. His head slightly tilted downward, but even from that distance, it felt like he was staring straight at the camera again. Straight at me. I leaned closer to the monitor and checked the other cameras. The escalators were still off. The elevators hadn't moved. And the staircase camera between the second and third floor showed nothing. No one had gone up, which meant one thing that didn't make any sense. He had appeared on the third floor without using any of the paths that should have taken him there. At that point, I had two options. Ignore it and hope it was some kind of camera glitch, or go check it myself. And unfortunately, checking things was literally my job. So I grabbed my flashlight and my radio and stood up. The security office suddenly felt much smaller than before. When I stepped into the mall hallway, the silence hit me immediately. During the day, the place was full of noise. Music from stores, people talking, footsteps everywhere. But now, the entire building felt hollow. Every step I took echoed across the marble floor. I walked toward the central escalators first. They were completely shut down like they were supposed to be. Metal steps frozen in place. No movement. I shined my flashlight up toward the second floor railing. Nothing there. Then I looked up at the third floor. The food court lights were still on. But from down there, I couldn't see inside. I had to use the emergency stairwell to get up there. The stairwell door creaked slightly when I opened it. Inside, the air felt colder than the rest of the building. The stairwell lights were dim and flickered slightly as I climbed the steps. Second floor, empty. Third floor. When I pushed open the door to the food court hallway, the silence somehow felt even heavier than before. The smell of leftover food still hung faintly in the air. I stepped into the food court slowly, shining my flashlight across the tables. Empty. Completely empty. Exactly like it looked on the camera feed earlier. No man, no movement. Just rows of chairs stacked on top of tables and the quiet hum of the overhead lights. I walked through the entire food court area just to be sure. Checked behind the counters, looked near the kitchen doors. Nothing. After about 2 minutes of searching, I started to feel a little relieved. Maybe it really was just a camera glitch. Maybe the system had replayed an old recording or something. So I turned around and started walking back toward the stairwell. And that's when I heard something. A sound from behind me. Very faint, but unmistakable. Footsteps, slow footsteps, coming from the far end of the food court. I froze instantly. My flashlight beam shook slightly as I turned toward the sound. The far hallway connected the food court to the cinema section of the mall, which had been closed for years. Most of those hallways stayed dark overnight. And right now, that corridor looked completely black. The footsteps stopped. For a few seconds, there was nothing but silence again. Then, one more step. I aimed the flashlight toward the hallway entrance. The beam barely reached halfway down the corridor. Everything past that point was swallowed by darkness. I waited there for what felt like a full minute. Nothing moved. Nothing came out of the hallway. Eventually, I convinced myself it was probably just a noise from the building settling. Old buildings do that sometimes. Metal expanding, air vents moving. At least that's what I told myself. So I slowly turned around and walked back toward the stairwell door. But just before I reached it, my radio crackled to life on my belt. The sudden sound nearly made me jump. At first, I thought maybe the cleaning crew had come back and was calling me. But the radio wasn't connected to anyone else at that time of night. Only my unit was active. Still, the radio kept crackling with static. Then, through the static, a faint voice came through. So quiet, I almost thought I imagined it. But I heard it clearly the second time. A whisper, right through the radio speaker. And the voice said just 3 words. Don't turn around. My entire body went cold. because the voice didn't sound like it was coming from far away. It sounded like someone was speaking directly into the radio and standing right behind me. For a moment, I couldn't move. My hand tightened around the flashlight as the words from the radio echoed in my head. "Don't turn around." The voice had been quiet, almost like a whisper, but it was clear. Clear enough that there was no way I imagined it. And the worst part was that it sounded close. Too close. Like someone was standing just a few feet behind me. My heart started pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. The food court was completely silent again. No footsteps, no movement. Just the soft hum of the overhead lights. I stood there, frozen for a few seconds, trying to convince myself it was some kind of radio interference. Maybe another security frequency had crossed into mine. Maybe it was just static. But deep down I knew that wasn't true, because the voice hadn't sounded like static. It sounded like someone speaking directly into my radio. And there was only one way someone could do that: if they were holding another radio, which meant someone else was in the building. Slowly, I raised my flashlight and pointed it toward the stairwell door in front of me. Still closed, still quiet. Then I took a slow breath and did the exact opposite of what the voice told me. I turned around. The flashlight beam cut across the empty food court. Tables, chairs, counters. Nothing. No one standing behind me. I quickly swept the beam across the entire room. Still nothing. The hallway to the old cinema was dark and empty. No shadows moving, no footsteps. Just silence. For a moment, I almost felt relieved. But then my radio crackled again, this time louder. The same whispering voice came through the speaker. Yes, but now it sounded amused, like someone laughing under their breath. Then the voice said something else. Something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "I told you not to." Before I could even react, every light in the food court suddenly flickered. Once, twice. Then the entire floor went completely dark. My flashlight was the only light left. The beam shook in my hand as I turned in a slow circle, trying to see if anyone was there. And that's when I heard it again. Footsteps, much closer this time, walking slowly across the tile floor. But the strange thing was, I couldn't see anyone. The sound was moving across the food court, circling me. Step, step, step. Like someone walking just outside the edge of my flashlight beam. Every time I turned toward the sound, it stopped. It then started again somewhere else. Behind me. To the side. Closer each time. My chest tightened as panic started to take over. I backed toward the stairwell door slowly, keeping the flashlight pointed in front of me. The footsteps followed, always staying just outside the light. Then suddenly, they stopped completely. The silence that followed felt even worse. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, my radio crackled one last time. The whisper returned. Right next to my ear through the speaker. "Run!" That was all I needed. I grabbed the stairwell door and pushed it open as fast as I could. The metal door slammed loudly against the wall as I ran down the stairs. My footsteps echoed through the stairwell as I practically jumped the last few steps. When I burst back onto the first floor, I didn't even slow down. I ran straight through the main hallway and out the front entrance. Cold night air hit my face as I stumbled into the empty parking lot. I didn't stop until I reached my car. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped my keys trying to unlock the door. The moment I got inside, I locked the doors and looked back at the building. The mall stood completely still in the darkness, the upper floors barely visible through the glass windows. Nothing moving. No lights flickering. No shadows. Just the silent building. I drove away from the parking lot without looking back again. The next morning, I went back with the daytime security manager to explain what happened. At first, he didn't believe me. He assumed I had heard something in the building or maybe seen a reflection on the cameras. But then we checked the CCTV footage from the night before. And what we saw made the situation even worse. Because the recordings showed the moment I entered the mall. They showed me doing my patrol. They showed me walking into the stairwell to go up to the food court. But after that, every camera feed went blank. for almost 12 minutes. No video, no recording, just black screens. Then the cameras suddenly came back online, and the first thing they recorded was me running out of the building. According to the system logs, the cameras had been manually disabled, which meant someone had turned them off from inside the security system. But there was only one computer in the entire building that could do that. The one inside the security office. The same room where I had been sitting earlier that night. And the manager assumed the system had glitched. But I knew better. Because before I left the office, I had checked every monitor. And the office had been completely empty. No one else inside. No one behind the desk. No one near the computer. Which means someone had turned off the cameras without ever appearing on them. I quit that job 2 days later, and I never went back to that mall again. But sometimes I still think about that voice on the radio and about what it said. Because the longer I think about it, the more one detail starts to bother me. The voice told me not to turn around, and when I did, there was nothing there. But maybe that was the problem. Maybe whatever was behind me that night only existed when I wasn't looking, and maybe the only reason I'm still here is because I ignored it.